the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation was established to provide leadership and also coordinate all matters relating to humanitarian challenges and poverty alleviation in Nigeria. However, the ministry, which is saddled with the responsibility of putting in place social protection systems that are proactive, humane, inclusive, and sustainable for the betterment and general well-being of the Nigerians, has come under scrutiny for various allegations bordering on corruption. This is the focus of our discussion today. The issue is threatening the dream of the present administration of lifting less privileged Nigerians from poverty and giving them, that renewed hope for a better future. Now, since the matter dominated the media space, various allegations and various organizations have been calling on the Tinubu administration to probe the corrupt officials of the ministry in keeping with its renewed hope mantra. The federal government on its part says that it will look into the matter. Now, we'll be talking about this, and we have in the studio Awal Musa Rafsanjani, the Executive Director, Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center from Lagos. And we also have joining us via Zoom, the Deputy Director of Social Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAF, Barrister Kolawole Oludare. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this morning, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
All right. So let me start with you, Rafsanjani. Would you describe this crisis, if you like, in the humanitarian ministry as a two-fighting situation? Because I'm looking at the sequence here. First, it was the coordinator of the National Social Intervention Program, being arraigned by the EFCC over, 37 billion naira misappropriation. And then secondly, we had this leaked memo, where the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Betterment, was indicted, sort of. What do you make of what's happening there?
Thank you very much, and good morning, Nigerians. First and foremost, we are not surprised with this scandal going on, because this is something that has been going on for a very long time in various places. If you recall, the last administration set up a committee, what they call Transparency Portal. And in that committee, you had membership of EFCC, ICPC, and some other, non-state actors there. In that committee report, you need to see the amount of scandal, in fact, outright diversion of public taxpayers' money into individuals in their own personal account, which they call project accounts. So this diversion of public taxpayers' money has been going on. What happened with this one is just by accident, because the previous regime did not do anything to either block or stop those people that have been, taking public taxpayers' money in the name of project account. And this is a huge amount.
It has been normalized.
They actually is a culture of impunity, culture of violation of financial regulation, culture of violating public procurement law, culture of violating due process, and it is simply, driven with knowledge of people that supposed to stop it, and they have not taken any action. So even when the new minister came, this system continued. So it's not only the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, this broad fraud is going on, is across various ministries and prestata. And that is why we must take this incident as an opportunity to further investigate and block the leakages. Because if you don't do that, Nigerians will definitely continue to suffer the absence of development. Nigerians already are suffering from, artificial poverty brought in by wicked, irresponsible political elite in this country at local, state, and national level. So we are not surprised with what has happened. It's just that those who, are desperate to steal, they were just, in contradiction. I think if government is serious about this, it is about time to block leakages. We cannot be borrowing money to, get this money into just some few individual pockets. Most of these monies are actually money that we have borrowed, and we are going to pay heavily for it. As you can see that our entire earning revenue is not even paying up completely even the service charges from the loans we have been borrowing, and this is how this borrowed money are being spent. If you recall, in the last administration, this ministry has been under serious scandal. National Assembly has several times called for either investigative hearing or public hearing on the activities of this particular ministry, but because there was no political will to checkmate it, both the National Assembly and the executive, their report never go anywhere. So that is why, when the new minister and her own people came, they also want to enjoy what the previous ones have done, because they appear to be, both of them, untouchable people, or people that are close to the pillar. Sadia was one of the closest to the then President Buhari, and therefore whatever she was doing, it was not of any interest to put satellite and investigate it. We have seen better also. She's also very close to Tinubu. For you to be given that ministry, definitely you must be very close to the president, because it's one of those places that they call lucrative places. Juicy. So this is not a surprise. It is what we've been talking about, corruption in public sector. And when people say there's no corruption, or they come to dismiss, now we are seeing the consequences. We are seeing the repercussion. You can imagine approving tickets for a non-existent airport as allegedly being
Honestly,
mentioned.
we cannot, I don't think Nigerians would say there is no corruption. There is nobody that would say that. But then let's talk to our guest via Zoom, Mr. Kolawole. Thank you so much for joining us. So we've seen, Serap coming out to point out a lot of misgivings, misappropriations happening in the federal government. But then this one comes as, at a shocker, considering when it comes to Sadia, it took her, to finish her own tenure for these things to start coming out. But then Betta Edu just barely assumed office. I mean, if we're going to use the normal term, we would say she hasn't even found her footing yet. And there is this huge money allegation. What is your take on all of this?
Thank you very much, and good morning. And good morning, particularly to Mr. Rafsanjani in the studio. I do not think this is a shocker, at least not to anyone in the civil society or for people that have been keenly following the activities of governance in Nigeria. And so this is not about individuals, this is not about personalities. It's about our governance process and the lack of transparency and accountability across board. Yeah, so it's the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs today. I won't be surprised if it's the Ministry of Finance or the Ministry of Marketing or even the National Assembly or even the presidency itself tomorrow, because these things they exist as a more in a state of non-observance across the militaries. And just to highlight this, Serap has 2 cases in court presently against the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, which basically borders on freedom of information requests and requests for how the conditional cash transfer and those palliatives that falls under the purview of the ministry has been dispersed and spent. So this is not surprising, which is why, much more importantly, the advocacy, which would be around the conversations that we're having, and I really much appreciate your organization for doing this, is to enlighten Nigerians as to the state of affairs and what it should be in view of the various laws that regulate government activities, so that while we are solving these, we are also creating enough awareness for Nigerians as to what exists in other departments and agencies of government and how it should be stopped.
Well, Kolawole, can we afford to treat this issue of Betta Edu in isolation? Because I tend to think I'm trying to wrap my head around what will give someone such audacity when there is a clear provision by the laws that spells out how monies from government coffers should be spent, in clear terms. So, for instance, you talk about the Chapter 7, Section 713 of the Nigeria's Financial Regulations 2009, it clearly spells out that personal money shall in no circumstances be paid into a government bank account, nor shall any public money be paid into a private account. This practice has been normalized, sort of, like Rafsanjani have also pointed out, has been normalized in government offices. So how do we, where does the confidence and the audacity comes for someone to actually go ahead and do such?
Of course, it comes from precedent, either by way of time or by way of offices. So why should we be surprised that this is happening in the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs? It is happening at the presidency. Sarah passed a lot of judgments against the government. And I can mention too that yet to be obeyed that concerns the presidency itself. For instance, why has the government not provided information, as the court had ordered last year, that's a federal court Abuja, about how the loan for the CCTV and infrastructure in Abuja has been spent? This is just simply a matter of disclosure. That judgment is pending, and the president is here to obey that order. Again, we have a judgment that asks the Nigerian government to give Nigerians, not Sarah, as Nigerians, details of how much had come in by way of Abacha loot and how it has been spent. If these orders of court can be disobeyed at that level, why do you think impunity will not prevail in ministries, departments, and agencies of government? So these things do not exist because we have people that are corrupt in those agencies. Is because of the level of impunity creating precedent for further impunity to occur. So it is not because, and I don't think we need to have a knee-jerk reaction as to faults the laws we have. Of course, the laws are not perfect, but the laws are clear as to procedures of government. The Bureau of Public Prosecution public procurement is there. The Public Procurement Act is there, and the various regulations and directions, which you alluded to one of them, Section 713. It's clear. But that is not done. And that continues to go on at various levels. Which is why I'm also suggesting that the aim of this kind of conversation is to ensure that Nigerians who go to the ballot every 4 years to appoint leaders are aware of these things as they are. They are aware of their rights and duties, and they can bring much needed public pressure to bear on every public officer, starting from the president to even appointees at the local government level.
Let's come back to the studio, Rafsanjani. Talking about what the ministry came out to defend themselves about the issues, where they said, even though in the section that Ayuba made mention of, clearly said no government money should move to a personal account, but then they tried to justify it, saying that it followed due process. Do you think them trying to explain themselves with that kind of information, is that really tangible?
I think it is also part of the impunity. One, clearly this is what our law said, and you now try to twist it. And like I said, we are privileged to know how this fraud has been going on, because when the last regime came up with this transparency portal, we have seen in that committee how individuals actually were taking huge amount of money into their own personal account in the name of project account. So that's why this did not actually shock us, did not surprise us, because it's a practice they've been doing because of impunity, because of disobedience of our financial regulation, public procurement law, and due process, as well as ethical values in the administrative system of governance in Nigeria. So this has not in any way shock us or surprise us. The only thing here is that the media and the civil society have sustained this exposure that has happened. In the previous ones, the media and many civil society were not opting to see those, fraudulent transactions in the name of, project account or in the name of even poverty alleviation. Look at the amount of money that somebody was spending in COVID. Children are in their parent houses, and you say you are spending money, to feed the children when schools were closed. Look at the amount of money that somebody say was using to train people for computer. Look, if you look at the spending in that particular ministry, you know that it is a ministry that its spending has been very suspicious, very dubious, and completely not meant to help address poverty. Secondly, this ministry is supposed to be a coordinating ministry. It's not an implementation, because you have NEMA under it, you have Refugee Commission under it, you have various agencies of government that directly deals with some of the issues that they are supposed to do. They're supposed to be like a coordinating body, an oversight body, but it becomes, because it's a business, of making money there. The people there are just operating as if they are operating in isolation. So I think there's need to do a lot of fundamental reforms in Nigeria.
Now, each time government comes up with a policy, it will be very beautiful on paper. In theory, it's you could see that the intention is, based on the paper, it looks very genuine, and it looks like, yes, this is the way to go, and it will address some of the challenges that Nigerians are dealing with. But when it comes to the issue of implementation, these issues always come up. And you find the issue of impunity, corruption, and so on, kind of destabilizing or sabotaging efforts or policies that are intended to help Nigerians and so on. So what do we do? Can we do without these policies? Should we throw away the baby with the bathwater? What should we do? Should we scrap the humanitarian ministry?
See, we have to come back to the basis. The whole essence of governance is not commercializing governance. Unfortunately, in Nigeria now, at local, state, and national level, people use dirty money to capture power or to rig themselves into election or to buy appointment. Now, when you have commercialized and privatized governance, this is what you are going to be seeing. Like I said, it's not only Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs where these things are happening. Virtually everywhere in government, you have this element of fraud going on. Because first, you have turned public service into a private gain. Okay? You are supposed to provide and lead for quality governance and ensure transparency and accountability and inclusiveness in governance. Now, people are purchasing this position. When they get in there, they don't care about serving the people. They only care about how to recover their money and make more profit. This is the state at which we are today, at various levels, whether local, state, or national level. Secondly, as long as you will not allow decency, professionalism, experienced people, honest people to be, in charge of different governmental agencies, you are likely going to end up with this one chance people.
But how do we know? How do we know who is honest and who is not?
It is very clear. It's very clear. There are so many people who have track record in service.
Okay, so we'll come back to that. The issue is, you talked about the commercialization of the whole process, the recruitment process, the political system itself, that you usually usher in these people who have no integrity in some instances. And then eventually they also bring in their friends and cronies and so on. But let me go to Barrister Kolawole. What do we do? Do we scrap the humanitarian ministry? How do we ensure accountability and transparency even as government discharge its functions? Apparently, it has gone beyond, the system cannot really handle itself, can it?
Thank you very much. So when you ask, what do we do? It tends to, it's almost like an Herculean task, which is why I think that empowering Nigerians would be the best approach to hold public officers and, of course, by also public institutions accountable. The media, which you are part of, civil society, of course, have been doing a lot over the years to make government accountable. But ultimately, the people, Nigerians, should be able to do that. Because, again, they are the ones that go to the ballots to elect those who would eventually appoint the crop of our leaders every 4 years. So Nigerians should be able to... we're having this conversation, and it's going on around the country in different fora. Beyond those conversations, there should be action points that citizens can take to bring the much-needed pressure on government to do the right thing. Which is why the risk of conversations like this being sensationalized is high. But we must keep our eyes on the ball, so to speak. The people must be empowered to speak up, to continue to speak. And perhaps that is what has led the federal government, just yesterday evening, in responding to the popular call to order and investigation. But that must be sustained. So it is not just enough at the federal government that the president has ordered investigation. Nigerians must also follow, continue to talk about this until we've seen the outcome of the investigations and individuals who are found culpable, of course, face justice. So I think that is the best approach. Nigerians must continue to hold public officers, public institutions accountable to do what the law says they should do.
Barrister, I'm just wondering how far-reaching, you talk about Nigerians to speak out, how far-reaching can the voices of Nigeria go, and whether or not we can sustain that conversation? Because oftentimes what we find is that when things like this happen, for the next 1 week, 2 weeks, we talk about it, we shout about it, and then hey, government says, okay, we're investigating, we're looking into it, and then that's the end of the matter. So what then happens now, as the government has said that is going to investigate this? What are the areas that should be looked into, and how can we keep track of what's happening and ensure that whoever is involved, is actually brought to justice?
Thank you very much. And so that has shown us that we have a strategy that works already. The public outcry had made the federal government to react. So we've seen that works already. What we need is now an informed public to be able to frame their asks to government in specific terms, which is, for instance, in this particular case, who are the agencies investigating this matter? In our own letter to the president, that is Sarah, we have a specific ask. We had asked the president to instruct the Attorney General of the Federation to work with anti-corruption agencies to investigate and prosecute, because naturally the Attorney General of the Federation has those statutory constitutional powers. So, and that would mean that whatever outcome of this investigation, with whoever is found culpable, will have, so are they in court. So the public must be enlightened, and that strategy cannot fail. But once the public, they are enlightened enough to know that this advocacy must be sustained beyond the sensationalism around it, beyond other narrow interests of tribe politics and religion, then what we've seen that has brought the present reaction can be sustained. And so informed conversations like this is at the bedrock of such enlightenment to the people, so that this is just not a game forgotten and then we move on to the next sensational story. I think it is still a good approach that will work.
Okay. But people, okay, I want to ask you this question before we come back to Rafsanjani in the studio here. But you made mention of the fact that Nigerians are not understanding this. And would you say that even the memo that actually came out, that leaked, is one step of saying Nigerians are now waking up to hold people accountable?
Yes, and that's why I think we can look at this as low-hanging fruit. The fact that this whistleblowing, whatever the motive that can be ascribed, because this is really whistleblowing in every sense of it, that there may be motives that we can ascribe to these leaked memos, but whatever we make of it, it is a right step in the right direction. And so Nigerians must now be able to know that this is not about where the president comes from, or where the minister comes from, or whatever tribe or religion or which side of the political divide they belong to. It is about good governance, and we must continue to sustain this pressure until the needful is done. So I consider that leaked memo is a right step in the direction. And if Nigerians are talking about it enough to make the government to react, it's also a positive outcome. What we need to do is to sustain it. And people must be educated enough to understand the issues and how it affects every one of us to be able to sustain these conversations. And within this context, these are funds that are public funds, number one. These are funds that supposedly should be used to bring millions of Nigerians that are reacting presently out of poverty. And now that has gone on for long. No wonder the level of poverty continues to rise while the few continue to enrich themselves. These are those things we must put into conversations like this to ensure that Nigerians understand the issues clearly and are able to continue to speak out.
All right, Rafsanjani, let's talk about the ministry in general. Talking about these allegations that have been, put on the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, do you think this would affect the ability of the ministry to deliver its humanitarian responsibilities?
First, like I mentioned earlier on, and like it has been stated when the ministry was established, the ministry was to coordinate the activities of different agencies, particularly Refugee Commission, NEMA, and the rest of them. If that has been going on, you would have seen this less, personal involvement in all this. Secondly, if we have adhered to the regulations and administrative processes, this would have also not have come. I want to tell you that, there's no way any ministry or any minister would just come up, with PIGA approval. There must be memo. Now, who are the people behind all those initiatives of the memo, of the whatever that has happened now? That is why I think the permanent secretary in that ministry must also come to answer question, because he's supposed to be the account officer of that ministry. So it's not only better that has done something maybe allegedly unethical or Sadia, where are the other people working with them? Because the minister is like the final approving, person. There will be other people who are supposed to, initiate memo, make comments, recommendation, look at everything. Where are they in this whole saga? So if we want to do a thorough investigation, they should also be brought in there. Secondly, in a decent society, when you are confronted with this kind of huge allegation, what do? You step aside, pending the outcome of the investigation. But in Nigeria, you will see that the more you are accused, the more you are actually entrench yourself into the position, because this absence of accountability is there, and because you think you are close to the biller, so that's why even the previous ministers who have done similar thing, because they think that they were close to the biller, they were close to the president, Buhari, they did what they wanted to do and they get away with it. Okay, so this time around too, those who think that they are very close to Tinubu, they will do whatever they want to do, unless this public outcry catch up with them.
Yeah, so would you consider this then as a test case for the current administration, and how important it is for the current administration politically to stamp its foot on the ground, and to demonstrate how different it is from the previous administration?
You see, this is the reason why, from inception, we call on President Tinubu to take stand on corruption. And if you have taken a stand on corruption, your ministers, your appointees, they must also join queue with you, because they know that you are not going to tolerate any corrupt practices. And if there is a silence on that, then they will think, okay, let's just do whatever we can do, since we are very close to the biller, the political party chairman, we are close to him, so they can do whatever, we can do whatever we want to do. Look, there must be serious reforms in our public institutions. I think the kind of democracy we are operating has given people impression that they can break the law, they can, perpetuate, corruption, impunity, and once you think you are close to the government, you will go and procure judges, because this whole reform we are talking about has to do also with the administrative justice system. Because if you perpetrated this crime and you go and bribe the judiciary to clear you up, like we have seen in many instances, then we will continue to experience this. So public service should be actually reformed in Nigeria. Appointees that will come, for example, many of them did not even declare their asset. Even if they've declared, they under-declare or over-declare. Okay? So how do we make sure that people that are coming to public service are people that are doing, or that will do the right thing? And like I said, there are many places where you have experienced people, honest people, who, if you bring them, or if you bring them there, they will be able to at least demonstrate some level of decency.
That is if the
one
government
question that I want to even ask is, how did we get here? I mean, the Westerners that we're trying to emulate are keen on being real patriotic to their country. Everybody wants to do something to say, I give back, I did this for my country. How did we get here that it's now all man to themselves? Everybody wants a position to just go and find a way to, allegedly siphon some funds
because
instead of moving the country forward.
Because democracy had been misunderstood by people who have hijacked power. They believe that it is about primitive accumulation of wealth. So you have one house in Abuja. The moment you are given an appointment, you will have several houses in Abuja, Lagos, Port Harcourt, Kano, Kaduna. This is the mentality, and then you steal the money, you go keep abroad where you don't even have access to it. The one that you have access to it in Nigeria, you die, your children will start taking drugs, and at the end of the day, there is nothing, no legacy to show. This is what many of the Nigerian looters are going through. Their children, they send them to UK, America to school, they will not do anything, they will be taking drugs there. They come back here, you die, they inherit the money, and they are still consuming drugs.
Truly a sad situation.
This is what they are doing.
But let's talk to Barrister. Now, the senior pastor of the awaiting the second coming of Christ Ministry, Adewale Giwa, talked about the agency, the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, calling it the money laundering ministry, saying that it was even created in the first place, for ways to just siphon the nation's money. So what do you think that is true? Is there any truth, to what he's saying?
That's a claim or allegation, as it were, would have to be subjected to investigations and then ultimately to the judicial process to ascertain the intention behind the creation of the ministry. That is the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, which again is why we must keep our eyes on the ball and not sensationalize this. As I would find it hard to come to that conclusion as to the intention behind the creation of the ministry. But what we do know as a fact is that this irregularity happened, and irregularities have come for long, not only in that ministry, but at several ministries. So it is not only about the purpose for which it was created, but that how are the processes created by law being able to drive that ministry to function? Which is why I like the point that we made earlier by Mr. Rafsanjani as to the ministry itself is ideally supposed to be coordinating several agencies of government, not to implement directly, at least not to a very great extent. But again, that anomaly has created role for all this to happen. But much more importantly, this issue borders on transparency and accountability, which we've seen is happening everywhere, including the CBN. Like we've seen recently what is happening to the former CBN governor. And we've seen that it happened to even the use of ecological funds by governors that have been convicted of the use of those funds. Would we then conclude that the CBN, the ecological funds, were created solely for them to be siphoned? I do not think necessarily so. We should be able to look at the issues where they come from. Lack of transparency and accountability. Opacity in governance means that a lot of people can enrich themselves, and Nigerians will not know about it. And that's why these systems must be open. So, for instance, Sarah has been at the forefront of making sure that the asset declaration forms of everybody in Nigeria, public officers, by the way, including the president, is open for Nigerians to say. That is the reason we've been doing this for years.
All right. So with the probe that Serap has been doing, we've seen so the civil societies, follow on what the federal government is doing in general. Would you say that your probe has gotten to a point where you would say the Nigerians have felt a little bit of impact of the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation?
I do not think so. I cannot answer that question in the affirmative, because to answer that question as to whether the ministry has fared well since its creation, we must look at how much has gone into the ministry, how much has gone out, and then we can now look at the impact. But it is not enough to say, like we've seen many governments, administrations do over the years, we have allocated X, Y, Z to this ministry. We hear the billions and the trillions, but on ground, it doesn't show that way. The last administration of President Muhammadu Buhari claimed that he would lift more than 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. Incidentally and ironically too, and that same week, the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics released a report showing that more than 100 million Nigerians multidimensionally. Doesn't as a fact speaks for itself in that instance. It's to weigh whether that ministry has failed with other ministries, depending on their specific mandate. We must look at the forms that has gone into them, the functions they are supposed to serve, and the outcome. In this instance, more Nigerians have been poor over the last 4 years, particularly within the last 6 months of this administration. And then it calls the question: the justifiability and effectiveness of the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs.
Okay. All right. So, Barrister, what should we expect from the humanitarian ministry when it comes to disbursements of funds? What should be the right channel? What should be the appropriate procedure for disbursing funds to beneficiaries? Like in this instance, we understand that the monies were moved to what they call the project account, like we have established here. But what happens to sending the funds directly to the beneficiaries, and what can we do to make the process much more transparent?
Exactly. That issues again. This conversation has gone on for long. You will recall under the last administration, it was called conditional cash transfers, and there was some sort of technical justification for why those monies were to be paid in cash. But with the involvement of civil societies and the advocacy by the people, it was streamlined to making sure that there is a paper trail to ascertain that even though there were payments in cash, there were proof that these monies did not end up in the wrong hands, which again would lead to what has been called the social register for the poor and the vulnerable. And that would mean that there must be specific processes to ensure that this doesn't happen. And again, this is not far-fetched. If the Office of the Accountant General has foreseen this, and the Bureau of Public Procurement has also foreseen this, and have issued regulations that clearly spells out public funds should not end in the private account. Again, that shows that this problem is not new. It has been foreseen, and there are rules to take care of it. The only reason it is happening is because of impunity. So, for instance, in this case, Nigerians have NIN, they have BVN. There are various ways to be able to trace either these disbursements electronically, or even if it's by cash in some instances, perhaps maybe in the areas that are not accessible, rather than paying it to private accounts where those individuals will not even be accountable, and so whether the monies reached the final destination or not.
Rafsanjani, how do we make sure that the funds budgeted and allocated for the Nigerian people get to the Nigerian people as intended, the poor and vulnerable?
In my opinion, it's very simple. Every community, let us have community leaders, let us have religious leaders, let us have labor leaders, let us have youth leaders.
Can we trust these leaders you are mentioning?
Listen, no, I'm talking about organizations. You know, if you have multiple organizations, if you have labor representative, you have student representative, you have youth representative, you have community leaders representative, religious leaders representative, you have, let's say, MBA and NAWOD and PIDA. If you have all these representative of, mass organizations, I can tell you no kobo would miss. And if any kobo, misses, they will be able to trace it. But when you do this thing secretly, or you just go and meet with only one or two person, then definitely there's tendency for this thing to go quiet or to go, to disappear. But when you bring in all this in every, local government that you are going to do this, you put together this structure. I tell you, not only on this money from the humanitarian thing, every other thing, every other palliative or support that is supposed to go to people, it will not disappear, because there are so many groups and people that will be watching and that will ensure that this thing goes to the right people. But if you do this thing that they used to do, this scam actually began even since during Obasanjo, when they started doing this kekenapi. Remember the poverty alleviation program of Obasanjo, where it ended up only to the party loyalists instead of Nigerians, irrespective of their political parties. So it's been going on for a very long time, and unfortunately we have not gotten the right leadership that will come to stop this fraud. But I am hoping that with this development, President Tinubu, who say he wants to succeed, should ensure that this has not affected his success as a president, because this has attracted international condemnation, and a lot of international community are watching. And let me tell you, if they don't take any serious action, the so-called investment drive that they are doing, they will not see anybody coming. And secondly, even the investors in Nigeria, you see how they are running. They closed down many ministries and factories, and manufacturing, companies have closed down because of so many things related to also corruption, extortion. So it is against us, and that is why the president must not only make a political verbal talk on this matter. They should make sure that they do not also exonerate their friends. They should make sure that there is a justice and fairness to everyone.
So that's where the issue gets even further complicated. When you talk about the friends and cronies of, the people at the helms of affair, usually when it gets political, that's where the issue becomes, complicated, and we do not see, that justice is served. We do not see that whoever is involved, is brought to face the law. Instead, what we've seen in the past is that they will be eased out of the system quietly without any kind of, investigation and then prosecution.
There's a limit. There should be a limit to how you emasculate public institutions to do their work. And any country that will be taken serious, already Nigeria indices, of development is very poor, is very bad. And if you cover up this kind of sin, more of it will continue to happen, and it will be covered. At the end of the day, the masses, the people that you want to govern, will continue to suffer, and they will continue to be causing you, So there's a repercussion, there's a consequences of cover up of issue like this. So let's allow the agencies, EFCC, and relevant government to investigate this matter. If at the end of the day, there's no clear evidence of indictment, fine and good. But let the president allow these agencies to do fairness in terms of the investigation. There should not be political control. Let the party stay away from this. It's not about political party. It is about Nigeria and governance. And if the President Tinubu wants to succeed, already you see there are a lot of damaging in the country. And if this kind of things are happening again and you are covering up, you are actually undoing to yourself, because already Nigeria image at the international level is very, very poor. And if all these things continue to be covered up, then definitely Nigeria will continue to receive negative attention outside.
Let's not forget also how Nigerians are now reflective of what the leaders are doing. Most Nigerians now, we tend to say, let's say some Nigerians now, are always thinking about themselves inside of the country. We've seen situation of people jackpying for greener pasture. But yeah, Barrister, this question is to you as a representative of SERAB, today on the show. What other ministries would you say SERAB are pushing on more investigation on? Because we've seen how SERAB has been back and forth in the court with the federal government. What other ministries should they be probed on because of a visible, clear misappropriation of funds?
Thank you very much. I would rather that we frame it as issues of lack of transparency and accountability, which you would agree with me is an indicator of corruption. So we are taking on these advocacy initiatives against various ministries, departments, and agencies of government, not because there is, in this instance, sensational leaked materials to incidents of corruption, but because there is lack of transparency and accountability. And that means, just like we've done against the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs far back as 2020, there are other ministries that we are in court against because they did not open their books. A very good example would be that of the management of ecological funds. In 2022, where there was this issue of natural disasters in the southeast. Of course, we wrote to the president through the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. It was under the Buhari administration then, asking for details of how ecological funds had been handled by his office to the various state governments, and of course the role that agency had played in ensuring that there is transparency in the use of those funds. We didn't get a response, and that matter is in court as we speak. And that brings up this question: why should such matters end up in court when the Constitution is very clear? Section 39 gives Nigerians the right of freedom of expression, not only to speak as you're having this conversation, but to receive information from everyone, including the government. And this is also in spite of the Freedom of Information Act that mandates public institutions, including the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs in this instance, to proactively disclose information to Nigerians even before they are requested for. Which is why, for instance, if you go to the website of the Budget Office of the Federation, you will see details about the 2024 appropriation. So why are we not seeing that across the ministries as to how much they received and how those funds have been spent? Even against the presidency itself, I had mentioned the various 2 lawsuits, judgments. These are not even lawsuits, judgments against the government of Nigeria that they are yet to obey. Recently, we had also been forced to go to court against the NNPC because, again, we do not have details of how much the NNPC has made or has spent or has even been able to bring in on behalf of Nigeria as a very important stakeholder in our economy. The matter is in court. We filed that suit last year. So these issues that we've taken up against these various agencies of government is just to show that the Nigerian government, starting from the presidency, is not that open and transparent for Nigerians to be able to even say with a certainty that we are fighting corruption or that this particular administration is not corrupt. And that is why we end up in court most times.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Daybreak show this morning. The Deputy Director, Social Economic Rights and Accountability Project, Sarah Barrister Kolawole Oluwadare, and also the Executive Director. Yes, that's the Executive Director, Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center from Lagos. No, not from Lagos, here in Abuja. Awol Musa Rafsanjani, thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this morning and sharing your perspectives with us.
Thank you very much.